This is a very unique task to be moving a fresco of this size on a 16-inch load-bearing wall.
How do you move something that's 30,000 pounds? How do you cut that out of the wall without destroying it?
You're looking at an artwork. It's a decorative surface that's applied with fragile layers of plaster. It was never really meant to hold up a building.
How can we still build the building and make this thing survive?
It's very involved, it's very complicated with a very low margin for error.
What the painting structure depicts is the process of building the building that the fresco itself is attached to.
This is one important moment in the history of art, so as part of our teaching mission, we have to make every effort to preserve and present these works of art.
This was new territory for all of us as far as how to move a fresco, how to protect it during a 3-year-long renovation project.
The very first thing we had to do was to isolate it from all of the construction that was going to happen.
We had to actually encase the fresco in a controlled environment. We had to build a room around it that had humidity sensors and vibration monitors on it.
We're constantly fussing over it, worrying about it, making sure that we don't damage it during construction.
In order to get the fresco prepared for the move, we spent several months consolidating the upper paint layers to give it some added strength.
We applied the protective resin facing right on top of the fresco.
This material called cyclododecane is a kind of waxy, crystalline material that can be applied to the surface.
It's a material that changes from a solid into a gas, and therefore we don't have to touch the delicate surface of the fresco itself to get all of that resin out.
In order to remove the fresco, we have to remove all the load from it.
We actually had several meetings trying to figure out how do we sequence all the work in that wall so that we move the fresco at the appropriate time and that the loads that are in that wall do not adversely affect the fresco.
If we keep it at the same load levels, then there shouldn't be any cracking or any problems.
One of the challenges is the structure resides in kind of the core of the building.
The fresco was on a 16-inch thick masonry load-bearing wall. It's got another 3 stories of brick masonry load-bearing wall above it.
We had to demolish significant portions of the structure in order to be able to move it.
We tried to take enough of the building away so that we could access it, but leave enough so that we would have an opportunity to use existing structure.
We had to put in temporary headers bolted into the brick masonry wall above.
What that header does is when you actually cut the opening for the fresco, it takes the load of the wall and actually distributes it so you're able to create that opening.
The next step was to put a frame on it and sort of cinch the wall up and squeeze the brick wall with the frame.
We put approximately 6,000 pounds of steel into this project. Then we bolted the framework together with 16 through bolts. Everything about it really had to be done with extreme precision to protect what we're trying to move.
We had to cut around the 4 sides of the fresco so that it's completely free of the wall.
The saw cutting process that we're going to utilize is done with a cable with diamond grit embedded in little teeth, and it runs through a pulley system.
As it's drawn over the masonry between the wheel and the holes that we drill, it is abrasing and cutting the masonry as it's going along.
We don't want water to migrate and perhaps get behind the fresco or somehow damage it. So the dry system was the system that we came up with.
And the only problem once you're doing it dry is heat. You know, you have the heat transfer to the masonry.
We have to make sure that we don't overheat because the material that's on the surface of the fresco will melt at 120 degrees.
I was out here while we were doing that with a laser thermometer on both sides of the wall, making sure that we weren't reaching that temperature. The bottom horizontal cut of the fresco was one of the most critical cuts because we had to slide in a series of 1/4-inch plates that get welded to the frame, so as you're cutting, you don't just have, you know, a void underneath the fresco.
You want to be sure that what you're doing is going to maximize the survivability of that fresco.
Originally, the plan to actually move the fresco was to install a couple of diagonal braces, and then from there we would attach some rollers. The fresco would actually roll on the slab to its final location. Since that plan, we've come up with a different approach of being able to fly the fresco to its final location with a crane.
You've got a mass of masonry that's 30,000 pounds, that's 15 tons. If that thing starts to move and you happen to get it contained properly, you can damage it.
It can twist, it could topple over. I think there's a huge amount of anxiety.
The boom of the crane has to go 140 feet in the air just in order to reach that 60-foot offset distance to reach the center line of the crane. So it's definitely going to be a monumental pick.
There's a personal connection with this particular fresco because Rubinstein captured the soul of the people that were building this building originally.
He shows the creation of the way the wall was built in the first place. So it's this wonderful window into building and painting.
This is probably the only fresco in the world that actually has a column splice painted into it. And, you know, to a structural engineer, that means a lot.
I think a lot of the trades on site feel a sense of pride that this is happening on this job and that they're involved with it.
I'm thrilled that we're holding on to it and going to preserve it because I think it would be a tragedy to have something of that importance disappear.
It sort of highlights what Skanska does best, these difficult, complicated projects.
The beauty of this particular move is that it's important to everybody that's doing it. We're just generations later of the same kind of people building buildings.